All right. Welcome, Commissioner Lee. That's perfect.
How are you doing today, Madam Chair?
We are very well. We are very well here, and the room is really quiet, ready to get going.
Yes.
It's deafeningly quiet. All right. I think with that, I think we're going to go get started here today. If that's okay with everyone, it's about a minute before. It's about 1:59 on the clock. I'd like to call the OUC Budget Workshop to order. I would also like to acknowledge that we do have a quorum present here this afternoon, and Mayor Dyer and Commissioner Lee, as you've just heard, are participating by phone. Before we begin, please note that if any members of the public are here today to address the Commission regarding the budget workshop, we'll provide an opportunity for public comment at the end of this first workshop. So please stay until that time if you'd like to speak regarding the workshop. Mr. Bullock, I'll turn the workshop over to you now.
Thank you, President Gross. I'll ask Mindy Bernay, our CFO, to come up. She's going to lead us in our budget presentation here this afternoon. The one comment I will say before she gets started is there are no rate changes being proposed here today. It is a budget workshop, and there's no approvals that will take place today either. I'm sure we'll go into those details. So with that, I will turn it over to Mindy.
I know it quite well, but it's completely black. Awesome. Thank you, Francis. Yep, now we're in full presentation mode. So good afternoon, Commissioners, President Gross, Mayor, Commissioner Lee on the phone, and Clint. Welcome to the 2023 Budget Workshop. I'm going to move to slide 2, Francis. And I really want to start the presentation today to share with you a little bit about our corporate strategy, which is really the foundation and the framework for us compiling the 2023 budget. We've done this for several years now, so really want to just remind you of the core foundation that we use to pull this together. I'll really focus on the right side of the visual. On the top of the chart is the Connected 2025 vision and mission. Our vision is to be an innovative solutions leader and the partner of choice. And our mission is to deliver exceptional value to our customers in the community. Supporting that mission and vision are 3 key pillars: our customer, our employees, and the community. What we have done in the past year is add a 3rd layer, which are our strategic and foundational portfolios. In prior years, you saw them as strategic initiatives. We've grouped them together into these 3 strategic portfolios with also a 4th focus on our foundational work to keep the lights on. So throughout the presentation, you'll hear me refer back to these 4 portfolios. They are the root of how we've developed the 2023 budget and capital plan. Francis, if you can go to slide 3, please. So when I talk about these portfolios, I thought I would start by sharing some of the strategic initiatives that are underneath these portfolios. On the far left is the decarbonization and environmental stewardship portfolio. Many of these initiatives you're very familiar with, and it is a continuation of our plan from the Clean Energy Plan into our Water Resource Plan, both for large-scale solar, energy storage, the retirement of Stanton 1, as well as the repowering of our Osceola generating facility. And then as well for water and electric, we have an energy efficiency on energy side and water conservation on the water side. Programs that are really focused around our customer. And as well, internally, we are continue to work on our lower Floridian, which are our water resource supplies, expanding those and ensuring that we have that for the future. On the second pillar, we have our innovation and growth. Really, that's 2 parts to that. That's our traditional growth, which supports the community development both in Orlando and the city of St. Cloud. And then our new products and services, which we interchangeably call non-traditional and new products and services. And they range from chilled water to electrification, backup generation, and lighting services. The 3rd pillar here is our business transformation. And that's a combination of digitization, technology, as well as supporting our employees into the future for a Workforce of the Future initiative. And so we have several initiatives around cybersecurity embedded in this portfolio, as well as our performance management for the employees and the build out of the St. Cloud facility. The fourth pillar here and the fourth portfolio is our foundational work. And we've always prided ourselves on delivering that exceptional value. And for that, we must maintain our assets. And we have the core operations embedded in here. And you'll see later the allocation of capital related to these three strategic portfolios and the foundational portfolio. I'm going to move on to the fourth slide. And so I share all this in advance to the diagram on the right really shows you the effort that we take in financial services to take the connected 2025 mission and vision, bring that down with the support of corporate strategy, bring that down to the strategic portfolios, the foundational portfolios, and then into the operating budget and the capital plan. So it's an upward and a downward motion to make sure that we are aligned and prioritized to ensure our capital resources, our human capital resources, and our finances are available to support all of our initiatives. If you'll move to slide 5, please, Francis. So in financial and support services, we really remain focused on the long-term view. You hear us talk about peer averages on a regular basis, and that's today. This slide is from the EIRP in 2020. You'll hear us talk a lot about fuel and how fuel prices are causing more volatility on the customer pricing, but I really wanted to demonstrate our continued commitment strategically to meet that 2030 target that we set out with the EIRP. And while the slope may not be the same, with fuel costs really being front-loaded in these current years, our target overall is to continue with less than a 1% increase on the customer price to deliver on the clean energy plan. So I've been sharing this for the last several years, and it's our North Star on the financial side to deliver what operations is doing on the, on the ground in the generation portfolio. And I'll stop here, see if you have any more questions before I jump into the favorite part of the financial team, the nuts and bolts of the budget. So Francis, if you'll move through slide 7 into slide 8, we at OUC, like many other regulated entities, really work and put our budget together and address our financials from a cost recovery perspective. A little bit different. When we have variances from cost recovery, we leverage the reserves that we have really to ensure that we return those differences to the customer on a regular basis. You can see here 21, 22, 23. 23 has a pretty big spike in it of about $180 million. 75% of that is all driven by the first layer of that column on fuel and purchase power expenses. They are pass-through costs, and in prior years, I could count how many times I said COVID. In this year, I will count how many times I say fuel is a pass-through cost. But, it is driving up our recoverable costs. We are passing that $1 billion mark, but that is really solely driven by the rise in fuel and purchase power cost. We have and continue to implement our business optimization initiatives to really keep our non-fuel based costs stable and really look at ways we can mitigate inflation and recession, which are really in the forefront of what we're seeing today. We've been talking recently about supply chain constraints, rising prices. These efforts on business optimization, we hope will continue to pay dividends forward as we streamline our operations. Francis, if you could move to slide 8. So here's the highlight, probably the biggest cost change that we will share with you today, and that is on the fuel operating expenses, fuel and purchase power. You can see in the chart on the right, costs are going up from the budgeted amount in 2022 of a little less than 250 million up to about 384 million. That's a pretty steep increase. We have been seeing this since July of 21. So we've seen it in the actuals, but the budget is now showing that with increased volatility into 2023. Our projected increases are about 55% of where we are budget year to budget year. We have taken and continue to follow our strategies to mitigate these fuel price increases for our customers, but the market has out-tricked all of our strategies. And while we continue to implement them in a very disciplined manner, commodity prices still are challenging. We have, beyond just the commodity price, there are labor constraints related to the delivery of coal. There are many other dynamics with the disconnect in Europe and the circumstances in Ukraine, just several different dynamics that took historic lows about a year and a half ago on fuel and purchase power to where we are today and forecasted into the future. We've listed out the ways that we have and continue to manage the volatility on behalf of the customers. We do a diverse fuel portfolio. However, the diversity has to come with delivery of the product. So our strength sometimes can be hampered by the fact that we can't get our product. We do engage and secure long-term contracts to really help keep the price stable over a long period of time. And that is both on the natural gas side as well as on the coal side and transportation for coal. And then, as you're very familiar with, on the energy risk management, we do hedge forward on that in a very disciplined manner as well. In May of 2022, the tool that we had to really insulate the customers on a monthly basis for volatility has been depleted. Our fuel reserves are now at a negative amount. They have increased again in the month of June. It's just a circumstance that continues to be something that is the polar opposite of what we've seen over the prior 3 to 4 years historic lows. So we will continue to manage these. I will share later in the presentation, we do have some contingency included in the budget for 23. That is in the budget book as well, very clearly. But as we move into the fuel revenue, I'll share with you the contingency that we have in here. Francis, if you'll move to slide 9, please. On to an easier conversation related to unit department expenses. Unit department expenses are projected to increase about 4.5%, much smaller increase. A lot of that, I would say to you, more than 100% of that is related to labor, because on the benefit side, we are reaping the value of really strong financial markets at the end of 21. We don't know what 22 will bring, but 22 doesn't affect us until 24 based on the actuarial pension and other post-employment benefit plans. So there is a 1-year lag on that. So we have taken the benefit of that, and there's a regulatory action in this month's commission meeting to really keep those prices stable and value that today for the customer. So we are filling a good portion of the driver of this cost increase is filling vacancies that we had during COVID, as well as addressing market constraints. The labor market has changed. The dynamics are very different as we come out of the pandemic. I listened this morning to CNBC, and post-pandemic is probably the word that you hear on a regular basis. It's just showing up in a lot of different places. But let me kind of come back to who we are today, and some of those positions that we're filling are directly related to our strategic portfolios. On the decarbonization and environmental stewardship, we are filling positions out at the Osceola Generating Facility. Those were not in our plan last year. They are in our plan in 23. On innovation and growth, we are continuing to fill those positions which were in the plan, but were put on hold. So we are beginning to fill those positions now. and then staffing for digitization and projects related to cybersecurity and other areas as we bolster up the increased risk around cybersecurity, which again, we are no different than anyone else addressing some of these concerns, but they change and we evolve, and these are the positions that we're filling now in the highlighted areas.
And when you say now, you're speaking to today. We're hiring now.
I'm saying today,
Okay.
but we only have 1/4 or 1/2 of this year.
Of the cost.
Exactly. So you have a full year next year. And some of the costs are showing up in contractor costs this year. But, you know, as we come out of the pandemic, we're really, with the recession looming, we are seeing a little easing up of resources, wanting to look for more stable organizations. And we're hoping that we will, as we've seen in previous downturns, will reap some of the benefits of what we deliver to our employees, which is that employee experience of a solid work-life balance and the longevity of OUC's history of being here 100 years and well embedded in the community. So we think that's a good selling point, especially as the recession hits. So I know Letitia will be leveraging that. And I'll be right behind her. Okay, so moving on to slide 10. Here we'll talk a little bit about depreciation and other expenses. When we brought the budget forward last year, we did not have OGS in our plan. That was acquired late last year. Well, with that acquisition, we made the decision to retire Unit 1. That changed the depreciation life of Unit 1. We were depreciating the portion that was related to the coal assets, but the asset itself was going to be converted to natural gas and would continue on through 2040. With the acquisition of OGS, we have accelerated the full retirement, and hence the reason why you see this big increase in the depreciation expense, because now Stanton 1 is being depreciated to meet the timeline of 2025. And that is all under the decarbonization and environmental stewardship portfolio. Under innovation and growth, well, you will see and have seen the revenue growth, but with revenue growth, there is infrastructure growth. And with that, it translates into depreciation expense. So we have seen very strong service growth, which has translated to revenue growth, both at OUC and in the city of St. Cloud. St. Cloud's growth in the current month was around 5%. So very strong. But what that translates to is increased depreciation because those assets have a life. And then as well, we have some new products and services that do not have the same 30-year life that are also contributing a little bit here to the growth in depreciation expense. On the other expenses, well, we do pay taxes, gross receipts tax, and other taxes on our fuel revenues. And so you see some increases there, but they are directly revenue related. Francis, if you'll move to slide 11, please. So a little bit of good news. When we go to the market, given the nature of who we are and the essential services that we provide, we typically secure our funding through fixed rate debt. And in situations where the interest rate is rising, we gain the favor of favorable interest income while our interest expense remains stable. So hence you see here that net non-operating expenses are coming down because we anticipate interest income will increase while our interest expense costs will remain static. So that is a favorable number and the largest driver here of the change between the 49 million and the 39 million. On the decommissioning of MAC 3, we have had the luxury of a little bit of a forward wind. And so we do see in 2023, the last year, which will be a little less than what we have in the budget this year. And so you'll see a small decrease there as well, about a 19% decrease in the costs. But that will be the final year of MAC 3. As we shared, I believe, I can't remember which meeting it was, but I believe we shared that the decommissioning costs are substantially offset by the salvage value of dismantling, not demantling, dismantling the plant. So the favorable commodity market will help us dismantle pay for the decommissioning costs of MAC 3. That's the preliminary estimate. And right now, that is what they shared with us. So no additional costs other than the write down of the net book value, which again is on track for 2024. So Francis, if you'll move to slide 12, please. So that's my operating expenses, and I'll share with you now our capital plan. This is a 5-year capital plan I'm sharing with you here. The cost for the 5-year plan, well, there's a $30 million difference, and for those who think in their checkbook, that's a huge amount, but for us, relatively stable over the last 3 years, 1.2 billion, 1.22, 1.25. What we are seeing here are, I'll give you the 1,000-foot picture first. What we are seeing here is a smaller amount of projects, more focused, higher costs, right? We've been sharing with you supply chain constraints, purchase order, supplier, wage inflation, recession, inflation. We see that baked in here, but a narrowing of costs because the timeline for these projects have increased. So we can only accomplish so much, and our suppliers can only accomplish so much. So it's a little bit of a rebalancing here of what is being accomplished. On the innovation and growth side, we do have about 219 million included in the 5-year plan for transmission expansion. That has been in the plan for several years. It's just now moved in a little closer, dialed by the number of years. On non-traditional products or new products and services, we have a little less than 100 million related to electrification, some modernization on the lighting and chilled water projects. Decarbonization and environmental stewardship also has about 103 million included in there for coal conversion costs as well as the Osceola generating station. And then the alternative water supply has about 78 million included in this 5-year plan. Additional costs out further beyond 5 years, we do a forecast for 10 years, but what we ask to get adopted is a 5-year plan. On business transformation, we have several initiatives going on, again, around digitization, cybersecurity, as well as the completion of the St. Cloud joint use facility. And that we have earmarked at 27 million, not just for our share, but phase 2 to be built out with the city of St. Cloud. So it goes beyond just 1 year and through to the 5 years for their build out. And then, as I shared with you last year, we looked at the ratio of strategic to foundational, and we see that ratio really weighing more heavily on the strategic side. About 64% of our portfolio is strategic based, with 34% really supporting funding-wise the nuts and bolts of our operations. I do have an asterisk here because I always like to remind people that solar, we acquire most of our, to date we've acquired all of our solar facilities through purchase power agreements, and they are not included in our capital plan. They are included in the fuel and purchase power costs. They are operating costs for us. I'm glad I don't have my 3-minute timer up here. Okay, Francis, oh, thank you. You've moved to slide 13. So I've cleared the operating expense and the capital plan, and now I'm going to share with you how we recover those costs. And that is, again, we design our pricing to be cost recovery based. We focus on price stability and predictability, and that feels a little uncomfortable for me in this environment. I have stood here several years and felt really comfortable saying that the volatility of fuel prices really, really hurts. It hurts for me, it hurts for the customers, but this is just the circumstances that we are. It is a foundation that we work really hard to achieve. We do work to achieve fair and equitable pricing across the customer segments, and we are always looking out to make sure that we are promoting conservation, whether that be energy or water, energy efficiency, water conservation. Sure I get my language correct by the type of service. So post-pandemic, we are seeing the return of electric and water services. We're not quite back to where we were pre-pandemic. Again, the residential eclipsed what we thought, but commercial is still lagging behind down in the Orlando service territory. We are, of course, blessed by growth on the residential side, but Gina and I were talking this morning, the restaurants are closed. There's just not the same level of activity downtown, especially during the day, because still a lot of people are working hybrid, half here, half at home. So we are seeing growth on the service territory side, both in Orlando and St. Cloud, and that is bringing some growth, good, solid growth. I don't want to shortchange that, but the largest driver of the revenue growth, again, is fuel, right? So you've got here about, let me make sure I have my numbers right so I don't miss. You've got $180 million of revenue growth between 22 and 23. A little less than 140 of it is coming from fuel. So 75% is coming from the fuel growth. Again, it's a nice that we've hit that $1 billion mark, but there's a bit of melancholy around that term. And so we are seeing beyond the traditional electric and water growth, we are seeing the growth related to chilled water and backup generations, as we will have a full year of operations for the GOA facility. We anticipate that will go live and we'll have a full year of operations for the customer-sided chilled water and the backup generation services, and then a partial year of the universal-sided chilled water. So, Francis, if you'll move us forward to slide 14.
Excuse me, Could I just ask, when does GOA go live again?
So, GOA, let me see if I get this. We are targeting for either late August, August 31st, or early September. Planes fly on September 19th.
Okay, thank you.
So Kathleen, who is my peer over at the airport, she's like, planes fly on September 19th.
Okay.
And so we're coming close to that. We meet weekly. There's a core team, Jan, Lemoyne, myself, Eric Roche, Wade, Chris Browder. We meet weekly with the GOA team. It's that 80-20 rule. The last 20% takes 80% of the time, and there is a lot of work that the GOA team is working on. But we are walking with them step by step and supporting them throughout the process. And it's been a really good partnership.
Both facilities are up and running, going through numerous tests. So we've seen that. Our team has seen that. Their team has seen that. But as you know, we've got to get it to the right point before we take the keys. So the team is working hard.
I was there 4 months ago, 3 months ago for meetings, and it seemed like it was ready to go.
The building.
I didn't know why planes weren't coming.
FAA's got to sign off on a few things too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's quite a bit, right? It looks beautiful from the outside, but yeah.
Yeah.
Trust me. They're not sleeping so well. Anyhow, it's a great, like I said, it's a great experience to be this close to that very big expansion. Moving on to electric revenues. Retail and resale revenues are projected to increase about 5.3 and 3%. Okay, there's a little asterisk there to share with you that included in resale revenues is about 7.7 million of Vero Beach settlement funds. We are using those funds to offset the cost for OGS. So the easiest way I can explain this is I try to explain these things in layman's terms. We're still running Stanton 1, and we are running OGS, okay? We don't want to charge the customer for 2 assets, because together they may combine to be one from a generation portfolio and megawatts being generated. It may even be 1+, but that would be great because we'll get sales from that. But right now, we're not projecting the volume of sales to offset the cost completely for OGS. So we are using reserves and only recovering from the customer for one facility. And that's what we use reserves for. They allow us to transition our portfolio without impacting the customer. So I'll stop, see if you have any questions on that.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Residential sales, strong, right? I mean, you know, there are parts of the country that would be enormously blessed with 4% growth, and we are very blessed to have that. You know, we are seeing the commercial sales again coming back, but just not quite where we were pre-pandemic. Here's where I will share with you that to balance the budget, we had to include a fuel price increase. Okay, I could not bring, by statutory requirement, I could not bring you a budget that was not balanced. And to balance that budget, I have a contingent fuel price increase in here. Now, we are monitoring that. Jan sends me emails daily. My team talks to me, I will say, well, I talk to my team almost every day, but we don't always talk about this, but at least once a week we talk about this. And so we are monitoring this very, very closely. We've had a fuel price increase in January, a fuel price increase in June. The January one was very mild at $2.50. The June was $12. So, you know, we are being very thoughtful about our core principles and affordability, especially given all of the inflation. But again, fuel is a pass-through. We're doing the best that we possibly can. So that's probably the third time I said that. Anyhow, we don't see at this point base rate increases. Working on our business optimization to keep our non-fuel energy costs stable and really focusing on the recovery of fuel revenues. If you will move forward to slide 15. Our last component here related to revenues is water, chilled water lighting, and service fees. And you can see in the yellow here the difference and the real growth that's coming from chilled water. That chilled water increase is about 23%, right? So it's a pretty big lift on the GOA and the Universal and that partnership with our top two customers. We are seeing increases in water, but you know, they're much milder, more in line with the traditional that we've been seeing in water, about 2.7%. And lighting and the other service fees are pretty static. They're pretty consistent year over year. The largest portion of that really is that chilled water piece. And Francis, if you will move to the next slide, please. So that really concludes my presentation. I have this visual here to share with you that through the midst of all of these challenges, whether they be supply chain, fuel prices, labor constraints, we shared in the Audit Finance Committee the affirmation from Moody's of our continued AA rating. We are in the process of getting our bonds re-rated by S&P. It's an annual review. We would expect the same thing coming from Fitch. Our ratings continue and our financial metrics are strong. We don't see any deterioration. What we are experiencing is very similar to all other of our peer utilities, and our growth is much better. So we really have a good story to tell them through the midst of all of these challenges. And our stewardship, your stewardship, the mayor, the city, the partnership are all really strong pillars in the new ESG world, and that governance and environmental stewardship that we really take the helm on really shows up in that rating. So lots of challenges, but lots of really good things, and I wanted to end on a good note there. We will be bringing back the budget for your approval at the August meeting, and then the acceptance of the capital plan. We accept the capital plan because monthly you see these construction estimates, and that's when you're actually approving the project. This is just the acceptance of where we think we'll be at the end of 5 years. And so before I conclude and ask for any final questions, I will say a huge thank you to my team. That book that you see in front of you, the presentation, just doesn't get done all on its own. I have a whole group of people in here. I have Wade, who is out on paternity leave here, helping, Christy, Whitney, Erin. I have a great team behind me. Gina and the corporate analytics team, really invaluable to help me make this presentation and the book that you see, along with Janice's team, making it look pretty and nice. So thank you, everyone, for your help. And I stop and ask, do you have any additional questions of me?
Don't have a question, but just observation, comment. Throughout your presentation, you talk about pre-pandemic levels in commercial area. Anything that you do in that area will come through growth. All indicators are, and I think I've used this expression before, non-essential personnel, those who are not tied to product. The pandemic has taught companies that they can cut lease. For example, there is a company that was leasing 6 floors downtown. They canceled that lease and are now operating on 2 floors, and the other 4 floors are working from home full time. You're going to see a large increase in what we used to classify in production as overhead expenses, overhead personnel working from home. So your commercial, from the lease, facility, that type of stuff, you're not going to reach pre-pandemic levels. You're just not going to see it. Once industry, we saw it at Lockheed when we merged with GE, who was on the forefront of, at that time, we called it telecommuting. Okay, I'm dating myself.
No.
It's sort of like I was teasing my kids. We talk about Zoom, and I date myself by saying the last time I heard Zoom, Lionel Richie was singing it on an R&B. But anyway, as we go through, you're going to see that kind of
Transformation.
Yes, and I just want us cognizant and cautious in that area. Okay?
I do think that, to your point, the transformation will happen. What we do see is a transformation in commercial operations to more industrial distribution sites, right?
Okay.
We do see that on the real estate side. I would venture to say at some point we'll see these commercial buildings becoming maybe residential and really looking at things differently. We do know that we have an affordable housing issue. And I know that the city is addressing some of that with funding that they are getting through the ARPA grants. So we may see, to your point, a transformation in what our portfolio of services look like. St. Cloud is 90+% residential. That is not the case here in Orlando.
Right.
But as we change and transform, very well may be something different. But yes, great observation. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, the Aloft, our old headquarters, is a prime example of being converted.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
And we walk through and they're still doing another renovation.
They are. They are.
Well, the old SunTrust part, the old and the new, the old one is supposed to be converted to almost like a college in which there will be studios and they share,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
it's a center place to, so
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
interesting.
Wow.
It will be different. We know nothing stays the same.
Please.
What is the FTE count at the Osceola generating right now?
19, I believe. Wade? What's the head count at OGS? Currently and on target.
About 19 total.
That's what I thought. 19 target.
When all units are
It'll take 19 to run the facility. And Wade will correct me if I'm wrong here. We're funding 19, even though we won't have all 3 generating it to run the site efficiently and do the upgrades. We'll need 19, and then we'll continue that staffing level. I got the nod. Yes.
And that places a lot more, reality when you see it in person than from all the pictures. It's a big difference there. The next question I have, you mentioned Goa and you mentioned, Universal. Universal is our number 1 customer.
Yes.
Yes,
Goa is number 2
That's correct.
yes.
before the new agreement or
No.
after?
They're
No,
always 1 and 2.
they're always one
Prior
and
to
two.
Oh,
Joe
1 and 2.
That's correct.
Always 1 and 2.
Oh, wow.
There's a big difference
You-
between
you-
1 and 2.
Okay.
And 2 and 3. I mean, there's,
Oh, not as big between 2 and 3. But 1 and 2 is, Universal comes close to about 4.5 to 5% of revenues, and Go is about 2.8, between 2.5 and 3. So once you drop down past Universal, it
Who's number 3?
could be
Hospitals?
or Orange County. It might be Orange County.
Orange County.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Orange County, Orlando Health. You know,
Okay.
we drop down into the hospitals and the
School
schools.
system.
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions on the phone? Mayor, Commissioner Lee?
No, I'm good. No questions here. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you both. All right, no other questions? We have now completed then the workshop presentation by staff. I'd like to invite members of the public to address the commission regarding the workshop. Mr. Bullock, do we have any members of the public here?
We do not.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments from the commissioners here, then I'd like to see if there's a motion to adjourn the budget workshop.
So move?
Second.
We have moved, we have a second, thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, sorry, I should delay. Sorry about that, guys. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes, thank you. The budget workshop is adjourned, the time is now, looks like 2:40 PM in the afternoon. So we'll now move on to our regular board meeting. Okay, switch hats. Oh, and by the way, thanks to the team, it was a compelling read, as much as that can get. I couldn't stop reading it. I want to see what was the next problem out there in the market that we had to solve this year. It's a terrible time. All right, but thank you for all the hard work on that. All right, maybe I could welcome right now Ms. Kalisha Davis to provide the moment of reflection. And I hope I said your name just right.
Good afternoon, it's Kalisha.
Kalisha, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, President Gross, Commissioners, Mayor Dyer, Clint. I'd like to start this afternoon with a moment of silence for the victims of the Highland Park mass shooting that occurred this past 4th of July. Please join me in a brief moment of silence in memory of the lives lost and the grieving families left behind. Thank you. So here we are, July 2022, and summer is in full effect. With summer, we kick off the hurricane season and lots of celebrations. Juneteenth, National Caribbean American Heritage Month, International Women in Engineering Day, and the 4th of July. Just to name a few. The 4th of July celebrates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Written largely by Thomas Jefferson, the document envisioned a nation where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness crystallizes the very meaning of being an American. The 4th of July is also a major movie holiday, and this summer, a few superheroes are set to hit the big screen. There is the legendary Space Ranger Buzz Lightyear, who's embarking on an intergalactic adventure, and Thor, who is on a quest for inner peace. Now, speaking of superheroes, what's your favorite superpower? Is it lightning speed, super strength, flight, invisibility? In this room, I think I will go with electric manipulation. Well, what about gratitude? Gratitude is also a superpower. Gratitude is defined as the quality of being thankful, readiness to show appreciation for, and to return kindness. Gratitude shapes how we experience life. It could be so easy to be grateful when things are going how we plan, but if we can be grateful when it doesn't, then we will feel the most profound impact of gratitude. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine or being in denial about what's going wrong, nor does it take away pain or sadness, but it does allow us to shift our focus towards what we can control. Cultivating this superpower means choosing to focus your time and attention on what you appreciate. It keeps us mentally resilient and grows deeper with commitment and discipline. So what are you grateful for right now? Who are you grateful for? I'll leave you with this challenge. Regularly share your thoughts of gratitude with 2 people close to you and notice the impact this superpower has on your life and those closest to you. Thank you so much. Have a safe and productive meeting.
Thank you, Kalisha. That was wonderful. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Rafael Suazo to come forward and lead the Pledge of Allegiance. As he's making his way up here, let me tell you that Rafael served in the U.S. Air Force for 4 years, achieving the rank of Staff Sergeant. He's worked at OUC for 17 years, and his current title is Senior Asset Recovery Agents. Please stand and join for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your service. All right, the time is now 2:45, and I call the July 12th, 2022 Commission meeting to order. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the May 10th, 2022 Commission meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to waive the reading of the minutes and adopt them as published.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 I heard one aye on the phone. I think I heard the mayor.
Aye.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Commissioner Lee. No, it's just hard, I know. Are there any opposed? No, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. All right, we don't have any service awards today, but Ms. Osani, would you please like to present the community recognitions?
Yes, please. Good afternoon, President Gross, Commissioners, Mayor Dyer remotely, and Clint. It's good to see you all. I am excited to present a couple of awards that the team has been recognized with recently. The first is the Golden Brick Awards, which is Downtown Orlando Partnership's exclusive annual awards ceremony that celebrates the people, projects, and initiatives that propel downtown forward. The 2021 Golden Brick Awards was held at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts on May 3rd. This year's celebration was actually the 33rd in the DOP's history. OUC's pre-apprenticeship training program won for the best community program in the downtown corridor. The pre-apprenticeship training program was one of over 60 different submissions to this particular category. And it's awarded, the Community Golden Brick is awarded to an individual, initiative, or organization who has made tremendous contributions to our shared community and has had substantial impact on downtown Orlando. Our program was chosen because it was deemed to have the greatest potential impact on the lives of the people and the downtown community as a whole. And I was there, I saw some of the other finalists, and when we won, we kind of stood up and yelled because we were very excited and proud to be represented in this category. So I want to thank all the people you've heard me recognize before. And again, Alandis Sims, who could not be here today, he has a family situation that he's dealing with, and the entire OUC Empowerment Task Force team for this effort. The potential impact of this program is immeasurable as we are creating pathways to jobs and careers at livable wages, building a pool of candidates to fill our skilled labor needs while ensuring diversity, equity, and inclusion in an underserved community in our very own service territory. So congratulations to the team. We're very proud of this award. The next one, if we can go to the next slide, please, Francis, is an Anvil Award. OUC was recently recognized with a prestigious award from the Public Relations Society of America, PRSA. They honored OUC for our strategic public relations campaign during last year's liquid oxygen shortage. We received the Award of Excellence in Crisis Communications COVID-19 Challenges Best Organizational Pivot category, which, I mean, if you don't think of Friends, It's kind of fun. Okay, for over 75 years, the Anvil Awards have been considered the icon of the profession and the benchmark of high performance in public relations. As you recall, back in August of 2021, almost 1 year ago, in the midst of the global pandemic and during a surge of critically ill, hospitalized COVID-19 patients, our liquid oxygen supplier experienced a shortage because most of it was being diverted to healthcare facilities. This was a challenge for us, as you know, because we rely on liquid oxygen in our water purification process. Nonetheless, we supported this approach, and however, we knew we had to face a problem, which was if the supply were completely diminished and OUC did not receive any, we would have to issue a mandatory boil water notice, and this would be issued to hundreds of thousands of our customers. So this was an all hands on deck moment for OUC. We instituted incident command. And so as part of the public information branch of that effort, OUC's communications team worked in tandem with water production, key accounts, customer service, conservation, marketing, creative services, and so many others to ask our customers to reduce their water usage in this unprecedented time. We did this through numerous channels, social media, news outlets, direct calls. Key accounts were calling our biggest customers. We were all working very hard asking people to use less. We also partnered heavily with the city of Orlando in this case to get the word out. We leveraged as much support from them as we could. We held 2 press events with Mayor Dyer. As you can see one of them up on the slide. And the whole purpose of that was to really impress on our community how dire of a situation we faced and to show a united front together with the city. After almost 2 months of reduced water usage, customers were able to return to normal water usage, while OUC never had to issue that mandatory boil water notice. So while the communications team was honored to receive the award, accept it is the word I meant, it really took a village to do this. It was not just our effort. So we're very proud to share this award with all the departments across the commission, as well as the city of Orlando, and with our customers who heeded the call and made the sacrifices to support our community. Those are the 2 awards.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for that. That's awesome. Okay, with that, we're going to move now to the affirmative items portion of the agenda. Mr. Bullock, before we consider the affirmative items, do we have any requests from the public to speak on the affirmative items?
We do not.
All right. Do you have any comments or presentations regarding the items?
I do. I do have one affirmative item I would like to highlight for the commissioners here today, and that's A15. I'm going to ask Sam to come up and give you a presentation. As he's walking up, we are excited about the continued expansion of floating solar. We recognize that there is an opportunity, I think especially in Florida. The economics are not quite competitive yet with the alternative, but when you begin to look at maybe transmission, if you have to wheel outside your system, and some other elements, it becomes to really be a viable option. So Sam's really going to walk through this consultant study that we're going to go through to really begin the evaluation process to understand what is the potential for this in our service territory. So exciting project, and Sam, can you tell us all about it, please?
Great, thank you, Clint, and good afternoon, President, Commissioners, and Mayor Dyer. As Clint mentioned, we're very much looking forward to doing this floating solar technical potential study with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, also known as NREL. And so over the next several slides, I'll provide some of the context and background of why we're doing this and what we plan to do with achieving the study. Next slide, please. So as you know, we have clean energy goals, and we're trying to become net zero CO2 by 2050, which is no easy task. But we also have some interim goals along the way where we're trying to achieve a 50% CO2 reduction by 2030 and a 75% reduction by 2040. What we found out from the EIRP is that we know it's going to take a diversity of different types of energy resources to achieve that. And that also includes across the solar spectrum as well, too. If you look at the picture on the right, we've done a variety of different types of solar installations, from utility scale solar to rooftop solar programs, as well as floating solar, which we believe has a lot of potential. This study really aligns well with the decarbonization and environmental stewardship strategic portfolio, which is something that Mindy mentioned in her presentation. And we're trying to roadmap what are the key capabilities that this organization needs to acquire in order to be successful in achieving our strategic goals. Next slide, please. So why floating solar? One of the key drivers that is really moving floating solar to becoming a viable resource is land scarcity. When we look at utility scale solar and developing these large solar farms, it does require a good amount of land, anywhere from about 500 to 600 acres. And that use competes with other use cases, whether it's agriculture or housing developments. We're seeing this around the world as well too. If you look at the chart on the right, which is showing the amount of installed capacity of floating solar, there's been a good amount of growth that has taken place over the past several years. And if you look at the yellow bars, which is showing projected growth, we're expected to see a tremendous amount of growth going forward over the next several years, with a large part of that expected to take place here in the U.S. Thus far, most of the floating solar activity that's happened thus far has taken place outside the U.S., mainly in Asia. And what's interesting is that floating solar is only about 1% of total solar capacity worldwide. So there's a lot of opportunity for this to grow. A few other interesting tidbits here. Last year, Florida's 4 floating solar arrays were among the top 10 in terms of size in the U.S., with our very own solar array at the Orlando International Airport ranking number 10. So pretty interesting. It's pretty cool that we've got some of the largest in the country, but it's also an indicator that there's a lot more in terms of growth and sizing for these floating solar arrays. And we also had the very first floating solar array in the Southeast with our Gardenia floating solar array, which is also an integral part of the nanogrid there. Next slide. So what we're seeing is a lot of factors that are really playing into floating solar becoming something that may have a lot of potential. If you look at the map here to the side, this shows the potential siting of floating solar systems in the U.S. It's a bubble chart where the size of the bubbles indicate the amount of surface area of water bodies available. And then the shading in the orange with the darker orange indicating how good of a solar resource there is. So obviously, Florida, we've got a lot of water bodies, and we have a great solar resource. Us, and along with some of the states in the Southwest, are prime spots for floating solar, especially utilizing ponds and non-recreational lakes. Now, given that, we do have to have a way of finding out of those water bodies, what can we actually cite? And there are a number of technical and economic factors that may potentially limit that. Next slide, please. And so that's why we're partnering with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. They are the U.S. Department of Energy's preeminent national lab, especially when it comes to renewable energy, sustainable transportation like EVs, and energy efficiency research. They are unmatched in capability when it comes to forecasting, modeling, and technology. And if you remember, we did partner with them about 4 years ago when we did the long-term distributed rooftop solar PV adoption forecast, which was really an integral part of the EIRP. Next slide, please. So in terms of the breakdown of this study, it's in 3 phases. The first step in this study will be to perform a geospatial resource assessment of floating solar in our service territory. The second is performing an economic valuation and land use analysis. And then finally, developing a decision support framework that will allow us to be able to cite actual projects. And over the next several slides, I'll walk you through the details. Next slide, please. So the first step is the geospatial resource assessment. what we start with here is really massive data sets of what we know of to be water bodies in the United States. And this study will rely on the National Hydrography Data Set, which is really the inventory of all water bodies in the United States. That'll be supplemented by satellite imagery as well as stakeholder input. But once you have that, you start to have to look at what are some factors that may limit the ability to utilize those sites. And those exclusions can be anything from access to roads, proximity to transmission and distribution, bathymetry, which is pretty much the topography of the floor of the water bodies, recreational use, and shading impacts. And then finally, we'll calculate the amount of technical electricity generation that we could get from these sites. If you look at the picture to the right here, this is an example. It's from a similar study that was performed by NREL for the Colorado Energy Office. And this is kind of an example to help visualize what we've been just talking about. They were looking at a reservoir for potentially siting floating solar. And with just the amount of surface area of this reservoir, they found that they could potentially site 4 floating solar arrays for a total of 35 megawatts. But after looking at factors like minimum water levels, the bathymetry, what they found out was that they could only site 2 of these solar arrays, and actually over in the southeast corner of this reservoir for half the capacity that they initially thought, and for a different interconnection point. So these are some of the unseen things that this study will help us uncover. Next slide, please. The second phase of this study will include the economic valuation and land use analysis, and NREL will perform a very detailed cost breakdown of the life cycle cost of floating PV and across different kinds of cost and performance scenarios. One of the key aspects to this is that they'll be benchmarking floating solar against utility scale solar. And this is key because utility scale solar really is the benchmark for all PV, where they'll take into account things like area use efficiency and land use benefits. As I mentioned before, utility scale solar, it does encumber a good amount of land, and there are competing use cases for it. Next slide, please. The final step in this process will be to develop a framework for site selection. This is really a tool to help us in terms of siting projects. That will also take into account other factors as well, other siting preferences that we may have. Not only project economics, but things like permitting, the ability to develop customer programs, visibility, as well as social and equity factors. We may have a preference for siting this in underserved neighborhoods that may provide additional benefits. In terms of the total project timeline, we're looking at about 7 months, kicking off in late July and ending February of next year. Next slide, please. So in terms of strategic benefits, we really do see this being very critical in hitting our overall strategic objectives. One, this will really enhance our long-term planning capabilities, providing us with an accurate characterization of true potential of floating solar here in our service territory. Second, this is a tool for us to help us make better informed investment decisions for projects. And then finally, as we march towards our decarbonization goals, we need alternatives, and this will help inform us if floating solar is one of those resources that we can count on, just like utility scale solar. Next slide, please. And then finally with that, our recommended action is to seek commission approval for a sole source purchase order to the Alliance for Sustainable Energy, which is the management and operating contractor on behalf of NREL in the amount of $115,000. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Oh, great.
Questions? Questions?
You mentioned about recreational,
Yes.
that cannot do it.
Yeah, we're looking at non-recreational lakes. So we're trying to avoid any possibility of interfering with, people especially. And we're actually blessed here. We do have a lot of non-recreational lakes and ponds, and that's our primary target for these floating solar arrays.
So they're not going to hurt your boating and all.
No, because,
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
So it's more expensive today. Just percentage-wise, how much more expensive is floating solar maybe compared to utility scale? Or?
Yeah, if you're talking about megawatt scale, you're still about 50% higher in capital expenditures. It's probably rivaling commercial rooftop solar and maybe even less, but so it's kind of in between.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's still a ways to go.
Residential solar rooftop, but it's just like the scale of utility solar farms, you can't beat that.
That's right, yeah.
And you're never probably going to find bodies of water that aren't recreational that have that kind of lake mass.
Yeah, and that's why I think one of the strategies here is to look at, can we aggregate a number of these ponds and smaller non-recreational lakes to deploy at scale. So, can we do 20, 30, 40 megawatts of this? And that's how you're going to drive the economies of scale here. So, but yeah, in terms of CapEx, there's still a ways to go in terms of maturing this technology. But there are a lot of promising signs for it, especially as we see limited land availability for utility scale solar. I think you might start to see that delta start to close a little bit.
I mean, I wonder also with more, climate impacts and flooding, I wonder if the DOT starts to look at water retention basins that aren't for recreational use that could actually be intentionally built that then would also incorporate maybe some floating solar.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to see. What can we do in other types of water bodies, not just these water retention ponds. There are some use cases of these floating solar arrays being used offshore as well too. So the technology is really flexible, and so I think overall there certainly is a lot of promise for it.
Maybe another question. When we first put the floating solar over at Gardenia, there were questions about the natural wildlife. Have those all been sort of eliminated? Because I didn't see it on your list of criteria that NREL is going to be looking at. Is that sort of like a non-issue?
Actually, environmental certainly will be evaluated as a part of the study. With the Gardenia solar array, we actually participated in a grant, in a DOE grant, along with NREL to study environmental impacts. So what we have found thus far is really there are benefits as opposed to negative impacts of floating solar array, in terms of algae growth, mitigating that, and also mitigating evaporation of water. So less of a issue here in Florida, but very helpful in drier climates.
And Sam, aren't we partnering with UCF that's doing some monitoring of the
That's right, yes.
quality of the lake?
Part of that consortium is, UCF and the city of Orlando are participating in that as well.
so you mentioned Goa, one pond,
Yes.
one there. Are there any more in that property that we could do or not?
I think we did evaluate some other sites. I think at the time we were really focused on trying to deliver that particular project, but I know that there were other water bodies nearby that were available as well. So we just haven't started that conversation yet. So.
Anyone on the phone, Mayor and Commissioner Lee, any questions or comments about this floating solar?
No comments here. No comments.
Thank you. I mean, the last thing I'll say, relative to the Senator Granholm visit down here that was cut short.
Yes.
I mean, if I think about Florida's resources, natural resources or renewable resources that we have available, there can't really be states that are in worse shape. We have solar, and that's it. I mean, even Alaska's got like hydro and wind. And so if you combine solar as the sole kind of renewable source we have, and then lack of transmission coming into the state, you'd think that they would really want to triple down on spending a little bit of, investing some time and effort in the state to try to help us figure this out.
Yes, indeed. I think that's one of the challenges we have is, solar really is the only game in town. Are there other ways to deliver that? I think with floating solar and, maybe potentially, other uses of rooftop, there are some, I think, avenues that we have to expand our solar capacity besides just our ground-mounted utility scale solar. So.
Yeah, President Gross, to your point, I mean, that was one of the items that DOE Secretary Granholm wanted to see, was that OUC's facility was the Gardenia facility and even the GOA facility for floating solar. As the president said, we were set up. We had the tour for her and her team to come in, and at the last moment, she was called up by the president for another meeting. And so, duty calls, right? When the president of the United States calls. So we did have a very, very short conversation with her, Linda and myself, Chris Castro, City of Orlando. So we had about 10 minutes of her time before she got on the plane. But it was a nice introduction, and we hope to get her back, here soon.
Thank you. I thought it was great.
Thank you.
Fascinating, actually, area. Before we vote, though, I want to ask one more time, are there any members of the public that wanted to address any of the affirmative items? No? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Greg Lee. I do need to declare a conflict on item number 6 and item number 19, just due to the fact that my firm has a level of involvement on both of those two matters. So I'll recuse myself on those two, if you don't mind, and I'll fill out the appropriate paperwork after the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Lee. I wondered about that. That's great. Okay. So let's take these in two parts. Okay, so here we go. Is there a motion to approve affirmative items A1 to 5 and A7 to 18?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Very good. Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes. Let's do the second round. Let's deal now separately without Commissioner Lee voting here. Is there a motion to approve affirmative items A6 and A19?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, that's right, sorry. I was waiting for Commissioner Lee. Sorry about that. All right, and opposed? No one, therefore, the motion passes. Thank you guys very much. All right, we made it through affirmative items here. There is no new business, so we'll move on to the presentations. Commissioner Mills, do you want to provide the Audit Finance Committee report?
Sure. The Audit Finance Committee meeting was held on June 29th, 2022 in person and virtually via WebEx. The committee was provided with the following informational updates. Fuel and purchased power expenses, given the unique nature of these pass-through costs, including the risk mitigation strategies employed to insulate customers from commodity price volatility, was discussed thoroughly. Ancillary pricing programs, including the evaluation of expanded OUC Community Solar Farm pricing program, and we received some clarification of the net metering policy. Thirdly, what you saw here today had an intro into the 2023 operating budget and the 2023 through 2027 capital plan, including projected reserve balances and liquidity considerations as well. We then also was presented with Moody's assessment of OUC's environmental, social, and governance risk, including the neutral rating, with no impact to our credit scores, which you also saw today. The committee was also provided with the update of the defined benefit and other post-employment benefit plan audit and actuarial results. And in conjunction with the audit and the stronger than actuarially assumed investment returns, the committee recommends the commission approve the recognition of pension expenses up to the annual active service member cost and the consideration of the pension and OPEB regulatory assets with a combined amortization through 2032. An update was also provided from Ernst & Young on the defined benefit and other post-employment benefit plan audit results. Quarterly financial and compliance reports were provided by management, including internal audit, energy risk management, treasury services, accounting, and budgeting services. All of these were presented, and the meeting was accepted, well planned, organized, and presented. That concludes our report.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to ask, is there a motion to approve presentation 1A?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Sorry.
Aye.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, it's me. Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, guys. The motion passes. All right, Ms. Bernay, would you like to present the financial report? Because we haven't had enough budget talk today.
Oh.
Well, I have good news, right? So sobering news on the fuel costs, but we have in front of you here the June financial results. We are still finalizing and tweaking that, so they may be a little different than what you see in the MD&A in the next commission package, but these are substantially complete. So I wanted to share with you the favorable headwind we have on retail and wholesale revenues. We are ahead of budget about $8.8 million, and that is really driven by retail sales. Warmer than normal weather. When we look at the bifurcation of the increase in revenues, we look at the growth in number of services and the weather component, AKA the consumption. So we see growth in consumption for the residential and commercial customers, and we see growth beyond our projections on the active services, with 5% growth in St. Cloud and about 3% growth in the Orlando area. So strong growth. What you don't see directly in here, but footnoted down in number 1, is that we have, related to the Lakeland sales and wholesale sales, we have about $11.5 million deferred. We are looking at how to ensure that we can recover these costs into the future to help our customers. So we're evaluating that. We are ahead of plan. So again, as a cost recovery base, we look at these reserves and how do we plan for them to best provide the value to the customers. Water revenue slightly ahead of budget, and then chilled water a little bit behind, along with some other revenues. But overall, about 9% favorable on revenues for the month of June. Again, strong retail revenues on electric, weather, and stronger growth. If you, Francis, will move forward to the next slide. Really wanted to share with you what we're seeing on the expense side. Expenses excluding fuel and purchase power are up slightly. And there is several different reasons around that, including our accelerated, some of the same things that I've shared with you in the budget. We're actually implementing here now, whether that be OGS, Stanton 1, we're really the retirement of those assets, beefing up the cybersecurity, bringing on staff, all of those components and the supply chain concerns that are causing us rising prices. We've been meeting regularly with our suppliers to address their concerns as well, because if we're experiencing that, they too are. So what you see is higher operating costs. Again, on the net non-operating, we are seeing slightly higher expenses here, a little bit of a disconnect. In the earlier
Gregory Lee.
Left.
In the earlier portion of the year, we had to rebalance the portfolio given the change and the quick rise in interest rates. So we did that deliberately to reposition the portfolio for the long term with that steep increase in interest rates. And then, as you can see here on the MAC 3, we are slightly ahead of plan there with the additional stronger revenues. We've taken a step a little bit further on that.
Gregory Lee.
Joined.
On that decommissioning. So we're slightly unfavorable to budget, but this is good because we have a little bit of room to make that step. And overall, of the 9 million favorable, we have expenses that offset about 6.5 of that. So we continue to monitor through the summer months. They can be very volatile. Storm season is right upon us here. So we do tend to incur several unplanned costs in the months of July, August, and September. So we like to go into that season with a little bit of headwind. And Clint's looking at Lemoyne because he knows it's storm season and every day at 4 o'clock. It's just a question of when it starts to rain. And Lemoyne is nodding. I give them a hard time and they give it right back to me. Look, this is storm season. This is what I need to do. So anyhow, okay, we're having a little discussion. I'm having a discussion with myself. Do you have any questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Concerning chilled water,
Yes.
you mentioned we're behind. Is GOA part of that or not?
Yes, GOA is part of that. We thought that they would be live by, May. We were anticipating revenues for backup generation and chilled water beginning in May. And so we have staffed accordingly. We've been able to utilize staff and continue to work on things that help us with our other plants, but we're planning to be operational in the month of May. Thank you, Jan.
So there's hope that we will not be in the negative.
Yeah, absolutely. This is temporary, right? I mean, again, we are meeting with them weekly. We're partnering with them. We're working with them to deliver. We do see the testing, the pre-commercial operations happening. They're testing the load on the system. We do anticipate by the end of this fiscal year, they will be live, and next year we won't see that revenue gap.
We also don't have the expense yet, right, in fairness, as they are going through their checklist. But again, as part of that transaction of closing, we will make that final payment, but.
We haven't paid them at all, but we
Correct.
did staff, in all fairness.
Okay.
We could not be ready to take on the responsibilities without training our chilled water operators. And that takes some time, just like any of our other resources. We want to make sure that they are skilled and ready to be on call when the conversion and the keys are transferred to us. So Eric Roche has been training staff and appropriately preparing for that. But we are partnering with the airport, and we're just now getting to that date.
Any other questions, comments? All right, anything online? You guys okay with the financial report? If so, let's.
Yep, all good here.
Thank you, guys. Mr. Browder, do you have any legal issues to report?
No.
None today, all right. All right, general appearances. Do we have anyone from the public who's requested to address the board today? All right, still nobody. I'm begging. All right, so we're going to move forward now with the general manager's comments. So, Mr. Bullock?
Thank you, President Gross. I do have an item that I would like to share. I'm going to ask Jan to come up to the podium. You may remember in the month of May, we provided the board an update on our Harmony 2 and Story Bend solar project. There were a couple of significant elements that Jan shared related to supply chain and also the Department of Commerce. So we committed to come back with an update. So Jan is here with a piece of good news. So I'm going to let Jan give you an overview of this update. So Jan.
Thank you, Clint. Good afternoon, President Gross, Commissioners, Mr. Mayor. As you may remember, back at the meeting in May, right, we briefed you on the impacts of three projects, 2 solar farms, Story Bend, Harmony 2, and 1 battery storage project, Story Bend Battery Storage Project. So we have an update, like Clint said, on something that's transpired here recently. But before we go there, just to give you a little bit of a review of what we talked about, we're primarily focused on 2 items. One was the inflation and supply disruptions, supply chain disruptions. And the second item was the Department of Commerce investigation into possible circumvention of tariffs on Chinese-made solar panels. So, that investigation basically brought the solar industry to a halt because the concern was that these tariffs that can be as high as 250% are imposed retroactively. So obviously, none of the suppliers wanted to be digging a deeper hole while they waited for the investigation to take place, which is still anticipated to be mid to late August that they'll conclude that. So we're going to focus on the second one, the Department of Commerce one. The supply chain issues and inflation, the item number one, that's still very much impacting us. So we are still expecting to have price increases, possibly. Don't know that yet. When we have more clarity, we'll be coming back to you. And we expect still some schedule impact. But this item that we're going to update you on will gives us a little bit more clarity on the schedule. Back then we've said 12 months or more. Now we think it'll be 12 months, no more than that, we're hoping. So going back to the update, so on June 6th, President Biden, through executive action, declared a 24-month moratorium on tariffs, solar panels assembled in Cambodia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam. That's where the investigation was focused. They were getting assembled in these 4 countries, but the argument from, if you may recall, from the domestic solar manufacturer was that everything was just being manufactured in China, shipped to those countries, and just simply assembled in those countries, right? So this moratorium basically, it regardless of what the Department of Commerce concludes, there will be no tariffs imposed for that 24-month period. And of course, the action came about after a lot of concern expressed by the solar industry that it was bringing the whole industry to a halt. And that, like Clint said, is good news because things have, the wheels are starting to move again. So we think with that being lifted that we won't see schedule impacts more than 1 year. So from late 2023 to late 2024 for the 2 solar farms. The battery storage project you had approved, but we were still in negotiations. We did not have an executed agreement yet when all this occurred. And based on the cost increases of battery storage, we have put that on indefinite hold for now. We're watching it, we're talking with the suppliers and so forth. And like I said, still the price impacts, we're not sure exactly what they will be on the solar farms. We expect there will be some. Back in May, you saw some of the inflationary impacts on the components that go into these panels. So we continue to have, discussions on a very frequent basis with our supplier in these 2 solar farms, which is NextEra. And with that, I will entertain any questions.
No, I'm good. That was good. Good update.
Any questions on the phone?
No questions here.
Nope.
Okay.
I have just one other item.
Thank you.
Mindy had a
Thank you,
chance
Karen.
to acknowledge her team for the budget. I would like to acknowledge the rest of the OUC management team. Every budget has its own bit of challenges. We all know that, and we've all been through them, especially when you're looking at the 5-year capital plan, trying to anticipate the supply chain impacts that we're seeing in our projects today, and trying to project where they're going. So it's been a very difficult process for the entire organization, like it is for every organization right now. So I do want to acknowledge the management team that's in here and the teams that are under them to support. Again, it's a collective effort to get through the entire process, and everyone has really worked hard. And there are some of them where we'll just have to be flexible throughout this process. There are going to be some things that we did not anticipate. So Minnie and her team will continue to to monitor and manage this. And I think lastly, I'm really proud of the team that we have not come forward with any type of rate increase on the non-fuel. To be able to bring a plan here without any changes, to the non-fuel base rates is commendable. So I really appreciate all the hard work by the team to get us to this point. Those are my final comments.
Perfect, thank you. Let me turn it over to final commissioner comments. Why don't we start with the phone first? Commissioner Lee, you want to go first if you have any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say good meeting, and wish I could have been there in person, but great work on the budget workshop and the presentations. That's all I have.
Perfect, thank you. Mayor, any comments?
I'll simply adopt Commissioner Lee's comments as well.
Perfect, thank you. Yes, Commissioner.
I have more of a question than a comment. We talked about the oxygen situation.
Yes.
All that. Concerning new subdivisions, this growth, is there anything there that requires them to do like Baldwin Park, what do you call it, purple water or whatever?
So reclaimed. And so we try to do reclaimed, where we can. We're not the supplier. And so it really just depends on geographically in relation to where the supply can come from either one of the city of Orlando or Orange County's, wastewater facilities. I think the last one, I'm not sure we have any active subdivisions where we have proactively put in the purple pipe in anticipation of the supply coming. Baldwin Park was an example of that for a period of time. I believe Eagle Creek might have been an example of that for a period of time. But right now, again, we don't have any of those, but we continue to work with the city and with the county, wherever it, makes sense. We try to get reclaimed in as it helps for our consumptive use permit as the water authorities are continuing to challenge us to get more in. So I don't know if anyone else on the team has anything else to add to that, but we continue to try to get as much of the reclaimed water as we can. Baldwin was definitely a big one, and we knew the timing of that, where the city was eventually going to get down, 436. We could proactively start putting that purple pipe in. I believe, it was a good 2 years, OUC, there were two pipes, the potable water and the reclaim, but OUC was serving through both until the reclaim was there to go through the purple pipe. And certainly a big project, and it's great to have reclaimed in Baldwin. But it's an important initiative for OUC as we work through our consumptive use permit.
Like Sunbridge, which is large. There's nothing there.
So Sunbridge will not be served by OUC from a water standpoint. So I cannot speak to the city of St. Cloud, and now they partnered with Toho. So I'm not real certain, but that is not our water service territory, that I know.
Anything else?
Just the other question was concerning that easement on Kirkman, and the reverend's a former employer, major shareholder. How big is that site? The one for that easement, the proposed Kirkman Road extension? I mean, on the map it looks long, but I don't know.
Oh, I don't think it's as large as it appears.
Chris, is that, so that's 819. Chris, is that something you're able to answer?
No, I'll follow up.
Okay, just, I mean, it looks big, but, like I said, maybe,
I don't know the circumstances
Okay.
around what the utilization is, so I'll find out for you.
and that was just land that we just had there,
Yes,
laying there.
yes, I'll follow up.
Okay, good. And then on the comments, like I said, good meeting as always. And that floating solar is, like I said, it's tremendous potential. If we can stay away from the swimmers and the boaters.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Mills.
Pretty much what's already been said. Thank you for the crispness and the clarity in the capital and in the budget workshop. That was very great. Congratulations on the 2 awards. I think those are bigger than we think from impact in the community and visibility. And I'm echoing everybody else. That floating solar was very informative, very informative. So thank you for that, Sam. And that's it.
Thank you. I first wanted to thank Orlando, who's sitting in the back of the room, and Eva Reyes, but I don't think she's in the room here today, for your participation last week at the EPRI Electrification Conference. It was a fabulous conference, a lot of focus on EVs and what's happening in that sector. So these guys did you guys really proud. They were everywhere, making introductions, talking about the issues, and so they did a really great job representing OUC. And then I just also wanted to mention those 2 awards that we got, because I remember the liquid oxygen phase and how, should we say something, should we not? And I just personally wanted to thank the mayor for taking that leap and saying, we have to inform folks, we got to get some partners on board. And I want to thank the big commercial customers and the residents who made this thing happen, because those are really touchy, kind of questionable, do you say something or just stay quiet? And you know what, I'm glad that someone recognizes, so I think you said the best pivot in the industry. I thought that was really good. So I think a lot of thanks go around for everyone who participated in that. It was I feel good about those kinds of things. And then that pre-apprenticeship program. Again, the word on the street out there, you guys all know this, but there are just no employees anywhere. And when you think about the scale up that's required, especially in the utility industry, for electric vehicle transformation that's coming, and even the electrification of buildings and heat pumps and everything that's coming, electric kitchen, electric stoves versus the natural gas stoves. There's just a lot of attention. And so everything we can do to develop these pre-apprenticeship programs to bring folks in that wouldn't have thought about the utility industry, I think are really going to pay dividends in the very, very long run. So I wanted to thank you guys for what you've done in that program, and congratulations for the award you just got. And with that said, if there are no objections, this meeting is adjourned at, I can't read, is that 3:35 maybe? 3:35. Thank you, guys.
It's pretty good.
Okay.
No, not bad at all.
A lot of-
Buddy Dyer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Take care,
Thank
man.
you, Commissioner.